Today I have a Siemens model RC20. This is a multiband, long wave, AM, medium wave, short wave, and I'll call it a limited FM because the FM band is only 87 to 100 megahertz, as it's a European radio from the 1950s, and back then their FM band ended at 100 megahertz. Anyway, this was brought in from a client to find out what the problem is, so let's check it out. I'm gonna guess this goes back to probably the 1950s sometime. That's been brought in for be checked out and serviced. So rule number one when we're dealing with vintage electronics like this is that we need to check that the capacitors have been replaced on the unit itself, because all the old paper condensers that this would have contained at this point in time will no longer be working. They'll be bad. And plugging in and powering up a tube radio, which is most certainly is a tube radio, that would just not be good. It would could draw too much current through an improper biasing due to leakage. What happens is you'll get plate voltage from previous stage will be leaking into the grid circuit of the next stage just due to electrical leakage of these faulty caps. Will drive a tube into saturation, which can destroy the tube and burn out other components like transformers and stuff that are behind that second or that next stage. So they have to be replaced before we even attempt to power this up, or at least checked. I was told that this radio was serviced a while back, so maybe the capacitors have been replaced on it. Anyway, let's take a look at the back of this unit. On the back, it's got the standard antenna and ground connectors. Looks like someone's just been using a piece of wire for the AM antenna. It's got the UKW or FM antenna that's going to be attached to the inside of the cabinet. We're just going to unplug these plugs for now. That way I can open the back and take a look at the inside of this unit. Most of these units, these Grundig units and Normandies, and this one's a Siemens, they're all very, very similar inside. Made in Germany, naturally. And there's the inside of this one. And as you can see on this one, it looks like this was a Normandy, this set, as opposed to a Grundig, because I have a Normandy set that looks very similar to this, and I haven't got to working on it yet. The antenna, you can turn the antenna around for the AM, and this one's circuit board construction as opposed to chassis. The point-to-point chassis is always a little easier to work on than the PCBs, but looks like these capacitors have been changed, and I bet you all the ones that are paper have been replaced on this. Let's take a closer look. Getting a closer look in here, it looks like the caps have been changed on this one. These have all been replaced. I don't see any paper wax caps in this unit. So it looks like the fellow that owns it did tell me it was serviced many years ago. It looks like the critical capacitors have been changed on this, so let's power it up and see what it does. Here's our tuning eye here. It's humming. Any of you rockets out there have any idea why it's humming? I can tell you exactly why. Because it doesn't know the words. Switches need to be cleaned for starters. Okay, volume control doesn't seem to be doing much. Let's see if I can tune in my test transmitter here at 1440. Volume control is broken for one. Let's investigate why that is not working. humming a bit, so I think the main filter is probably need to be replaced. Let's just flip this thing around again now that we get an idea what this thing is doing and what to expect. Okay, here's our main filters back here. In the back here, this is it here. It's gonna be a double cap. If I look at the one side of it, I've got about 195 volts. The second cap in here, 219. I think these probably should be replaced because I'm getting a lot of AC hum, which would typically indicate a partial or total failure of the electrolytic main filter cap. So I'm gonna go find a couple of replacements and we'll just replace those to start. To access that capacitor easier, I'm going to remove the screws on the bottom that hold the chassis in so I can slide the whole chassis out. So I think there's 5 screws that hold the chassis on this, if I'm not mistaken. 2 here and 3 down the bottom. And then the whole chassis should lift out. Screws out. I gotta probably pull the knobs off the front, I think, first. So I don't think the whole front lifts out on this one. Okay. So the whole front glass and everything on these ones lift out. Some of these radios do, some of them don't, but this is one that the whole chassis just lifts out like this. And we may be hung up on some of the wires here. I just have to make sure that all the wires are long enough to be able to lift the chassis out to work on it. Speaker wires and stuff. There's the speaker wires there. Got a ground wire back here that's holding me up. Ground wire here is held on by a screw. Now I can lift the chassis out to work on it. Now it will stay connected to the radio unless I actually physically disconnect the speaker, but I shouldn't have to do that. I should be able to get at everything from here. Sorry about the racket in the background. My neighbor has decided that it's time to vacuum his car. This unit's also got one of these selenium rectifiers in here, and that's also got to go. So I have a little 600 volt 1.5 amp silicon rectifier. A little more efficient and a lot more reliable. Oh, good. He's turned it off. Thank you. Installation of this is pretty straightforward. We've got our AC input. It's going to go to these 2 pins that are positive and negative, and this one's marked positive and negative. So we're just going to clip the original one out first. I'll just clip the wires and we'll just attach this one, and I'll basically just stick this one down. Okay, now he shut off the vacuum and now his dog's going to start barking. Wonderful. Also, if you notice, this is right where our filter capacitor is. He's turned it back on again, as you can hear. So I'm going to mount the filter capacitor just on the back. I'm just using 2 single caps. I'm just going to mount the negative terminal down and solder it down to one of these terminals here, which is the ground, the chassis ground. That will hold the capacitor in place, and then we've got our 2 sides. One side to this wire, the other side to this wire. I guess it goes through a resistor and comes back, or no, it probably goes through this choke coil, I'm thinking. Put one side of the filter in through a choke coil and then back to the second side. So we're going to have the 2 sides, and the one is going to go down to our rectifier when I get the new rectifier in. So let's just wire this in first. So I'm going to cut these wires off because this is what needs to go to the new capacitor first. So we'll get that wired in first. And of course I'm going to put heat shrink tubing over all of the exposed wires here anyway, so there's not going to be any chance of any short circuits. I tell you, they're either vacuuming out their car or they're cutting their lawn, but it seems like every time I set up to do a video, somebody in my neighborhood has to start making noise. It's either kids screaming, or it's a chainsaw going, or it's a dog barking, or it's someone running a vacuum cleaner vacuuming their car, or they've got their lawnmower running, or their weed eater. But geez, every time it seems like I go to sit down to do any work, I get all this noise in the background, and I can sit there and wait for an hour for them to stop, and then as soon as I turn on the camera, they start making noise again. Okay, here's our positive lead. That's going to go to the positive lead on the new rectifier. So we'll just put our piece of heat shrink tubing on there. And crimp this onto the positive lead to start. Two AC wires are down here, coming off of, I guess they're coming off this transformer. But here are the two AC wires, the pink one and the black one. And they can easily be brought up and connected to the two inputs on here, the AC input. Okay, the selenium rectifier has been replaced with a silicon rectifier, and I've got heat shrink tubing on all the wires, so there's not going to be any chance of anything shorting out. The split filter capacitors have been replaced with two new caps that are much higher rating than the original. So I guess we can try this thing out again and see whether it has improved the sound. I still got a volume control problem on this thing, but we'll deal with that once this thing fires up. The hum is gone, so we fixed that problem. I just have the volume control that's not doing anything right now. Bass and treble control don't seem to be doing much. But as you can hear, the hum that I had before, I don't have an antenna on this thing either. If I plug the antenna in, I'll probably pick up a little more than I'm getting. I think that's the antenna there. Or is it this other one? One of these two is... One of these two is...
You not be familiar with, maybe just getting to know it will...
Anyway. Now time to deal with the volume control, because it's not working. Do you remember the voltage we had before on the old cap that is now disconnected? I think we had about 195 volts on one side and 220 on the other. So that's gone to 268 volts, which is a little more realistic. And the other side's gone to 237. That was the one that was 195. So we've solved our voltage problem. Now I just got to fix the volume control, as you can see. Don't seem to do much. You turn it, nothing happens. So that's buried down here. I don't know whether the control itself is broken or whether it's the shaft or what, but it doesn't seem to do anything. Anyway, let's deal with that now. I think this control just might be stuck. You know, I'm just gonna take the knob off here because I think this might be just slipping. It feels like the control. Yeah, I bet you that's what it is. It feels like this control is just. It's just freewheeling and not turning the control inside it. And it's just gummed up, I think. Let's just see if I'm right. Let me just tighten down the screw here. Let's see, now that it actually turns the shaft, whether the volume changes. I bet it does. I think the knob was just slipping and it was going, it's probably a keyed. It's probably a keyed shaft and it was slipping, going like half a turn. Gonna wait for the tubes to warm up again. Aha. That's exactly what it was. Okay, so I gotta get the control apart and get some lubricant in. That's exactly what the problem is. So let's just undo the screw here and see if I can get the knob to come off without losing the screw, of course. Gotta be careful because this is glass, so I can't put any excess pressure on here or it could damage it. So when you turn the tone control, as you can see, it's moving this gear which turns the other control, and then the center shaft, which is the one that's slipping now because this is loose. I've loosened off the screw. I've got the screw loose, but the shaft doesn't want to, the knob doesn't want to come off the shaft. But what I want to do is I want to try and get some lubricant in between. Oh, there it goes. There we go. I want to get some lubricant down inside here so that the two shafts aren't sticking together. So I'll just take out this other screw here. And this is where I think our problem is right in here. So I'm just going to get some cleaner. Maybe I'll just give it a shot of WD-40. That should get down into that shaft and maybe lubricate it a bit so it's not so sticky. So here we go. I'm just picking some WD-40 because it's got good penetrating capabilities. Oh yeah, that's freeing up now. Still a bit stiff. I'll work this a bit. I'll give the shot, I'll give the control a shot of proper cleaner. Everything's getting freed up now, so that should fix this one up, no problem. Got the control here shot for the, I think this is the base control. I also want to clean the switches in the front here. We'll use neutral on those just to make sure that all the switches are good. There's several switches here. They're slide switches. So I'm just going to give them a shot each of neutral. Oops. End up wearing more of it than I get into the switch. Also going to give all the switches a shot. You can see the switches in the front here. Where are they? Here's the switches down here, you see. So I'm just going to give these switches a shot of cleaner. If I can get in there with it. Let's operate all the switches. And let's give the radio another test before putting the chassis back in. This will look straight down from the top. Now I know some of you are going to ask, what am I going to do with this? What am I going to do with this rectifier? Am I just going to leave it hang there? Yeah, and the answer to that is yes, I am actually. I don't need to really secure it to anything because the wire is going to hold it in place, and everything here is insulated with heat shrink tubing, so it's not going anywhere. So I don't really need to glue it down or tie it down or anything. It's not going to go anywhere, and a radio like this is not going to be banged around, and it's not like someone's going to throw it in their car and carry it around with them. Something like this, it goes back on a shelf and they listen to it. So leaving it just hang there on the wire is just not going to harm anything, no different than any of the other components that are just hanging by their wires in this thing. That's the way they did things, right? So yeah, it's fine like that. I'm going to mount the chassis now so we can give it a full test and check all the features out on it. So there we go, got it back together. Well, I don't have the antenna, FM antenna plugged in yet, but it goes pretty loud. One thing I noticed about a lot of these German pieces, well, European pieces in general, but the German ones especially, is that the dial is backwards. Like, your low end of the band is on this side, and the high end of the band is on that side. So everything is kind of backwards. I mean, you're going up in meter. So that is the medium band. I think this thing's got FM on it too. Is that FM? I think that's FM there. There's a separate band for that, I think. Where am I here?
Getting lost.
Yeah, because that's FM, right? FM's actually on this one here. Oh, is the pointer not working for FM? I don't see a pointer on FM. I'll have to go and take a look at that again. It doesn't move the dial. It like all the German radios, it has a gear that switches. It has two separate tuners. So my FM band is, I'm down at the bottom end. I'm at 87.5 because that's where that music comes from. It's coming from my little test transmitter. And then I receive it and put it on my little AM test transmitter. So I have the same thing that I can listen to on AM and FM. But here's the FM one. Now if I turn the dial to the right,
Parkway
CDC.
Road.
You can see the magic eye showing me the signal strength.
Silver Reef Hotel.
A comp.
So FM works. It's gonna see why that pointer is not there. Well, there's the FM pointer. It's just come off. I just have to put the string is there. I just have to put it back onto the string here. Thread it back on like that, and move it over, and reposition it so that it's pointing at the right place on the dial. I see what happened to it. Somehow it got out. There's a plastic plate here that it slides in behind, and somehow it's gotten out of there. That's how it got stuck. So I just have to get it in behind this plate. So I think if I pull it down a bit as I turn it, so I can clear this. As I turn the dial, as I clear this piece, I can get the dial back in like that. Now it'll be where it's supposed to be. Or I'm gonna slide it up a bit because I'm out of calibration. Okay, there are the units back together now. You can see my FM pointers down here. And it goes from one end all the way up to the other. But I don't believe this radio is going to cover the entire FM band. I think it only covers up to 100 megahertz like most of them, because that's what the band used to be. It used to be like 87 to 100, I think. Of course, it didn't ID, but a faster way to do it is just, there it is, 100.5. So the radio tunes 87 to 100. Which means all the good stations on the band it can't get, because at least here, the good stations that we get here are above 100. So I shouldn't say that, because there are some good stations down the low end of the band. There's 92.9 out of Bellingham. There's 93.7, a country station, and there's 96.9 Jack FM, and there's the Fox on 99.3. But the good ones, LG 104. Rock 101, that type of stuff, this radio is not going to get it, which is unfortunate. But that's the problem with a lot of the older German radios that were for the European market, was that they only covered up to 100 megahertz because that was the band. Now my own Normandy radio, that's my own, that I haven't serviced yet, which is, it'll get serviced one of these days, but it at least covers the entire FM band, and it says it has a button for FM stereo, but I don't know whether the unit actually has the FM stereo decoder. It would be a bonus if it does, because it's an all tube unit, and FM stereo on it would probably sound pretty darn good. But a lot of those radios that were made back in the 60s, FM stereo was something that was so new that most radios didn't have the FM stereo decoder, and they made it available as an add-on board or an add-on plug-in module that they have a plug on the back for MPX, and this might be the case with this one. It might need the MTS, or when I call it MTS, that's television. MPX. MTS, of course, was multi-channel television sound, which was essentially the same thing. It was stereo for TV, but it has the MPX multiplex output that would go to a standalone multiplexed decoder that would then feed the stereo audio back into the amplifier. It may be a radio of that era that requires an MPX decoder, which wouldn't be hard to do. It wouldn't be hard to, you get a solid state one out of a modern tuner and just use that as the decoder, because it would feed baseband audio into the decoder and then left and right back in. But that's this one done. We'll try some of the other bands on here. UK, that's the FM band. As you can see, when the UK button is pressed, it changes the frequency here on the UK band. And if I go to K, that is this band here, which is looks like 10 through 50 meters shortwave. We're not going to probably get anything because I don't have an antenna, except for some harmonics from my transmitter. And that's got the Lband, which is going to be long wave. Also, we're not going to hear anything on the long wave band because I don't have an antenna for one. But two, I don't think there is anything on long wave other than interference from DSL circuits and stuff. That's 350 meters down to 150 meters. And then the EMband, which of course is the AM broadcast band. And then here, we'll get our AM broadcast. Starting at the high end of the band, of course, and coming down. There's 1440, which is what I'm transmitting. It's the same thing that's on FM, which is this one. There's the FM one. AM. FM. You know, on a good AM receiver, most modern AM receivers are absolute garbage, but the older ones, when AM was still a format that was used for a lot of music, they had a wider IF circuit, and they actually sounded pretty good. And if you listen here, the AM sounds almost as good as I can switch between the same source on AM and FM. AM's a little more noisy. Go to FM. FM is better, obviously, but tone controls don't seem to have much effect, but I think a lot of it's got to do with this button here. Oh, that has something to do on the AM band. Maybe it's a noise reducer. Ah, that's what that does. It's bandwidth. That makes it narrow band and wide band. See here the difference? That's why it sounded good. That's why the AM sounded so good. With the FA turned on, that's limiting the bandwidth. That's narrow band. And there's wide band. Listen to another station.
Great. Washington has finally something to attack, and the Whitecaps score from it.
And we talked about set pieces ahead of this one. We talked about the importance of Tim Parker, and it's the Mac.
This is AM 730, Vancouver's traffic and information station. AM 730 is Canada's most listened to traffic station.
As extreme right demonstrators started gathering for a liberty or death rally today.
Metallica! Now you can stream over 1,000 radio stations.
Over one.
Every 10 minutes on the one.
For Citrus O Carpet Care, here's Brad Rask.
Over at the Iron Workers, watch out for a stalled van southbound at the north end of the bridge. It's now moved over to the right lane. It is in the clearing stages, but still very...
ones who are losing their voices right now. Whitecaps fans, this Bud's for you.
That's your tone.
Budweiser is a proud supporter of Vancouver Whitecaps FC. Breaking down the opening.
At PU, I'm going to say that that's the pickup. That's the pickup for like plugging a record player into the back. Okay. Let's take a look at the tube layout on this thing. Okay, on a radio like this is essentially a 4-tube radio for the AM and shortwave bands. It's got a total of 6 tubes in it. You've got one tube here, which is for your FM oscillator tuner. This is the FM tuning capacitor here. It has its own tube. And then your AM and shortwave tuning capacitor is this one here. And it has its own oscillator and mixer, an IF stage. And you've got a detector, and you've got your audio output. And then of course up front here, this is the tuning eye. These are the wires that take high voltage up to the tuning eye. And that's it. It's pretty straightforward design on this one here. Say these ones are generally quite reliable, as you can tell. Not a lot goes wrong with them, but yeah, this one's all ready to go back together. I'm going to throw the back on it now and let the owner know that his radio is ready for pickup. Notice on the back it has a adjustment. That's to change the position of the bar antenna inside for, I guess it's probably for AM and long wave. But you can rotate your bar antenna a few degrees anyway to optimize reception. Anyway, that's the unit back together. As you can see, you can plug a record player in, a turntable, or I guess in this case it's just a record player because it wouldn't be stereo. And you can even plug a tape recorder into it, and even an external speaker. Anyway, that's it, all done. I like this. Pull out mains plug before opening rear panel. Unlike the sets that were sold in North America, they had an interlock on the back so that when you took the back cover off, power was removed. But I guess the safety standards over in Europe back in the day there weren't quite as strict as they were over in North America, because this thing has no such interlock. Anyway, there it is, back together. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next one real soon.